Okay.
Okay.
It was just that funding was late coming in.
I'm under the impression that they're funded, that they have enough funding to go into several districts.
That's good.
Several.
Okay, I guess we will move on then to presentation of the initial proposed 2011-12 budget.
Last Tuesday when I presented this information, we'll start basically with the same format, and this is the revenue limit summary that we looked at in January, the possible scenarios. And on Tuesday, there was really only one scenario that I was really focused on, and that was 8.4% reduction in state aid and the revenue limit that had a decrease of approximately $522 and some odd cents. For a total per member increase of $8,977.76. Well, it wasn't, I don't even know if it was the next day or a day or two later. The Joint Finance Committee came out with a new proposal that would allow any district that was below $9,000 per member to increase their revenue limit per member to $9,000, which would equate to about an additional $22.24 per student in the school district of Tomah. And if you take a look at that, this JFC proposal, and that date isn't right, that should actually be 6/14 or 13 or 10 or whatever, you can see that would generate about $70,612 on the revenue limit. On the state aid, we would get approximately $40, or 40% of the state aid, which equate to another additional $28,258. And again, this is just an estimate, so based on the estimate that we've got here with the additional $70,612, it's about 40% there. And then an additional $257,000 on the computer aid, and then it would increase the tax levy then by $42,097. So at this point in time, since it's coming from the Joint Finance Committee, I think we probably ought to look at that. Might be something that happens. I don't know that I see that changing, but so that's what we'll work off of tonight. And if it does change, obviously we'll modify that. Hopefully have the budget together here shortly. The other thing to keep in mind is that not only are they looking at increasing to the $9,000, but then next year, I believe they put an additional $50 in there for the 12-13 school year, and I think that equated to that $50 times about 3,000 students could provide us the following year with an additional $150,000. That doesn't help a whole lot, but it helps. So right now, anything that we can get is very helpful. The next sheet I think we should then take a look at then would be a sheet titled summary, and I couldn't find it the last one.
Budget summary?
Yeah, budget summary. There it is. It's the first one right there. Last week, again on Tuesday when we met, I did not present a balanced budget at that point in time. And at that time, we were about $20,000 over budget. And as I said, that's not an insurmountable amount. And then we talked about adding back a few things, not implementing the fees for the athletics at that point in time. And the other item would have been, if we scroll down to the bottom of that summary, I think that was the only issue that we had at that point in time. There was some discussion about the late bus at that point in time. But adding back in, not taking out those fees, we were able to, or I was able to put together a balanced budget. And you can see that as you're looking, if we scroll back to the top here real quick, with Fund 10 total revenues of $31,059,186, with expenses equaling that same amount. And then what you see right below that is just Fund 10 without grants, because grants, as you can see in the block below that, grants revenues equal expenditures. So I wanted to make sure as a double check that our revenues and expenditures without the grants equal each other. And then as you move down through Fund 27, you'll see a balanced budget also. And then finally in Fund 38 and 39, you don't see a balanced budget, but this is primarily because we pay on the fiscal year and we levy on the calendar year, and so that means we're just slightly behind. But when we take a look at, when we redesignate our fund balance, there's about $395,000 in fund balance in our debt service, so it's not a problem. And that number will change as we move through the debt payment cycle. So, really the main emphasis tonight here is looking at is that I'm presenting a balanced budget. There's still a lot of unknowns though. I mean, they haven't even approved the budget for the next 2 years. Hopefully that'll happen within the next couple of weeks. We'll just have to see how everything, so to speak, shakes out after that. And then again, I'm not providing a tax levy or a mill rate estimate at this point in time, simply because we don't know what the state aid is. And until they actually put the dollars in the state aid estimate formula, it's really difficult to really know. We're shooting for that 8.4%. Any more than that in a decrease is going to have a more impact on the mill rate. There's more likely will be some impact on the mill rate, even as we look at the budget that's being proposed here. But as we've talked, we're still unsure what the revenue limit will look like in the 12 and 13 school year, and we do know that if we levy less this year, that will hurt us in the following year. And we already know that we're $570,000 basically that has to be eliminated just to start the school year because of that jobs bill funding money that we are using from the federal level at this point in time. So anything that I present after this will just basically be supporting documents to the total revenues and expenses that you see in Fund 10, 27, and 38. And when we take a look at the revenues, move it off to me here real quick. When we take a look at the revenue section of the sheet, we will look at Fund 50, and when we take a look at Fund 50, we are not going to be presenting the balanced budget. We'll be just looking at the revenues at that point in time, but Mr. Bender is recommending that we spend about $12,000 on additional equipment for the food service program, and we'll take a look at the fund balance, and I think you will see that there will be funds available for us to do that. So, any questions up to this point in time? Anybody on the Finance Committee, we talked about this a little bit. If you have anything to add up until now regarding the revenue limits, or Mrs. Zardy?
So the recent recommendation from the Joint Finance Committee would affect the revenue limit, allowing us $9,000 per member, but they did not propose any additional aid, state.
Yes, they did propose additional state aid, and that dollar amount is set at a maximum of $40 per member. And if I did the math right, we're looking at that $20,258 out of that 70 being about 40%, I think, if I did that. So that equates to about that $40. So we are getting an additional $28,000, approximately $28,000 to offset that increase in those dollars that we could levy. It's not all of it, but it's some of it. So.
And our timeline then looks like we would be in July knowing a little more of the numbers we're hoping.
Yeah, when we come back and when we actually approve the budget to be presented at the annual meeting, at that point in time we'll have a state aid estimate. But again, you're missing really two significant pieces, but one more than the other is one, student enrollment. I think, our enrollment isn't going to change a lot significantly enough that it's going to be have a significant impact on the mill rate one way or another. It could increase it a little bit, it could decrease it a little bit, but it isn't going to be significant. The area that we do have to pay attention to is our equalized values for the district. And right now, I don't have any increase in there from last year, so any increase will help the mill rate, any decrease will hurt the mill rate, along with the state aid estimate. So that's where we're at. So then, Barry, we'll move then into, I believe, revenues. I think is the next thing I'd like to talk about at this point in time. And again, You can go through and double check, but I went through and the numbers do calculate on the revenue, or match on the revenue side of things. I just got to find them, there they are. No, that wasn't that. It's revenues. Again, that's why. And again, you can see the 31,059,186 for total revenues. Significant changes or things of interest in this. Obviously, in the yellow here highlighted on the first page is our tax levy. That we will not know that officially again until we get our state aid estimate. We'll get a little bit closer, but not until the equalized values and the final state aid estimate are given in October will we be able to know what that exactly is. Down below you can see the equalization aid as estimated 2 weeks ago, and then the additional $28,258. Other of interest to us probably is when we look at the open enrollment. You're seeing an increase of about $57,833. That's good on the revenue side, but on the expense side, but you're going to see a corresponding increase that is even greater. So we're picking up some dollars there, and but we're also losing some on the expense side. And what I'm really interested in, I haven't had opportunity to really take a close look at it, is from year to year is the net difference. Because although you might have increases in expenses, you might also have increases on the revenue side of things. So if you net those out, you want to look at the difference between the net revenues and expenses so that you can kind of get an idea where you're moving. And there will be an increase. To what degree at this point on the net, again, I haven't looked at that. Again, transportation aid is estimated to go down a little bit. Again, we're not going to be getting a 4-year-old kindergarten grant this year, and that was equal to about $142,575. And we are not getting a DARA grant again this year. That was very helpful last year for purchasing the buses. And then significant, you can see the loss of the ARA funds. And then right now, if you look at the Title I funds, basically, I got to blow that up. Nobody can see that even if they wanted to. Can't see that I'm standing right next to it. Let's go on 125. My variance again here. At the 808, if you look at source 700, Title I Fund 10, right now we're showing a decrease of $124,305. You should note that 808 is just the allocation itself. We will be carrying over some money, so those numbers will go up. But again, revenues equals expenditures with grants. So that's not going to help the non-grants in the budget here. Another significant number you want to pay attention to then is the $570,000. Again, that's that federal jobs money we're seeing there. So, overall federal revenues are actually have increased slightly from the previous year, $50,563, and by the time you add that carryover there into that, it will be even more. But that's the good news. The bad news is we've got to replace that $570,000 next year. Moving down, there's just a coding adjustment there between the insurance adjustment and the aidable disbursement refund there. So that's kind of a wash when we look at the two of those. And then you can see overall in Fund 10, our net revenue, or our revenues are down from the previous year about $1.3 million. Fund 27, you can see our revenues are down about $95,419. And then when we look at the food service Fund 50, when we get to the very bottom of it, I believe I have a note of about $12,200 that Mr. Bender is recommending that we have our expenditures more than our revenue so that we can purchase some additional equipment, so. We will be coming back and looking at some increases in lunch prices. Typically, we do that in the July meeting, so we'll talk about that. And there's some federal government requirements at that point in time that are really kind of driving the increases in the lunch prices. And I think we've talked about those a little bit in previous board meetings. So that takes us then to the next sheet, if you find here, would be fund grand totals. And again, this I'm just confirming the numbers here with you. You can take a look at the decreases and the increases overall. Our expenses are down by approximately $1.3 million, not much different than our revenues. But that doesn't really tell the whole picture because there's some significant increases in there. So overall, I think if you remember, we were anticipating that we needed to cut approximately $2.1 million out of the budget. And we'll, again, come back to that as we kind of summarize everything here. And then again, you can take a look at the expenses in Fund 27. From there, I think we'll move right to the grant sheet real quick and just kind of summarize those very quickly. And we're going to head right down to the bottom of that page. And overall, again, our grants are down about $504,261. So you can see where that $570,000 of federal jobs bill money is a little bit misleading on the grant side of things because we are losing those ARPA funds in the grant areas. So overall, again, the majority of the loss is to the ARPA funds there. The next item that we'll try to move to is one titled Salary, 2011-12 Salary. Oh, that's a summary. I would love to be able to stand up here and tell you that I can explain in good order all the changes that happened in the areas of salary, but for me to say that would not be wise, because somebody will ask a question and surely I won't be able to answer that question. So I'll try to explain the major changes overall, and again we'll summarize them. But we've asked, and when I talk to staff I use the word ask, and I wish there was a better word because we didn't ask them to take a reduction in the employee portion of the retirement. They were told they're going to take a reduction and start paying their portion of the employees' retirement. We also told them that they would need to take a 12.6% reduction in their health insurance. They actually brought that proposal to us, but it wasn't that they wanted to do that. They felt they needed to do that in order to maintain their contract for another year, so they took that concession. So to a large degree, there's about $1.2 million in reductions there. We also eliminated six different staff members, but we did have some increases in the district-wide programs, which include increased costs to our severance pay, increased costs to some substitutes, substitute payout, and areas such as that, and also our fund transfer from Fund 27, or from Fund 10 to Fund 27 in order to make Fund 27 balance out here. So there are some costs related to that. So you can overall see the total net reduction that we had in Fund 10 on salary and fringes. And then in Fund 27, as we scroll down, you'll also see a slight increase there. And part of that is because we added 3 special education teachers, and also some of the ARA-funded aides that were getting coded in the ARA grants had to be moved back into district funds. So that's why you're seeing an increase there. There will be some discussion moving forward as to whether we actually want to code those 3 teachers in Fund 27, because as we've talked about in the past, there's an acronym called MOE, or Maintenance of Effort, and what Maintenance of Effort requires us to do is not to spend less money in one year than we did the previous year in Fund 27. If we do that, we can lose federal aid. So we kind of start to box ourselves in a little bit. And so what that means is those reductions that we possibly could see coming from the governor's budget, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of because you can't spend less the following year than you did in the previous year. So, but through some retirements, we're able to reduce that. And as we look at it this year with those increases, we're going to be able to meet maintenance of effort, but we'll have to do some calculations to see if we want to do that the following year, because we don't want to get in a trap where we can't reduce any expenses in Fund 27 if we have to. Because what happens then, now you're just proportionately spending money in one area than you are in another area. And we've always tried to be proportionate in the cuts. I think that's what we presented to you, and I think you've made some very good decisions based on those. So we'll have to keep an eye on that area. Non-salary gets a little bit clearer, and I would not have a problem answering most questions in the area of non-salary because it's just broken down a lot easier. It's a lot easier for you to see. Again, starting from the big picture here, we didn't decrease our non-salary. Although you're going to see a lot of red numbers on the side, you're also going to see a lot of increases. And we will talk about those increases. One is in transportation, increased about $60,000. I think that's kind of obvious when you look at fuel costs compared to where they were a year ago, and also most of what we do in transportation is associated with the oil industry. So we're seeing a lot of increases in supplies, and we've been running a fine line on the budget there for the last 3 years. We've actually been over. It's just now time that we increase and stop trying to kid myself mainly that those costs aren't going to be there. So we're still probably not where we should be if we were flush, but we will make a go at it with what we have here. The other increase would be in the maintenance department. That's the $32,000 that you're seeing there, and that primarily is from our refuse service that we implemented. And for snow removal. Our refuse was done in the salary and fringe side of things, so there should be a corresponding decrease in salary and fringe in the maintenance side of things and then a corresponding increase on the maintenance side, but the net effect should be a savings of about $25,000. So we're hoping to see that here with this. And then finally, district-wide programs. Again, we talked about that fund transfer. This is where that happens. This is where you are seeing that increase in, or where you're balancing out Fund 27. Revenues have to equal expenditures. You have to take money from Fund 10 to pay for Fund 27, and this is where that money comes from. And it's not all, again, that fund transfer. Again, it's open enrollment expenses. And as you scroll down through this page, or through this handout here, you start to get a better idea of, in the areas of non-salary, where those actual decreases took place, and it becomes very clear from the descriptions. And you can see the dollar amounts in total associated with them. And keep in mind, when we're looking at building budgets in athletics, we did reduce those by 25%. Okay? So those budgets, the ability for buildings to purchase equipment, supplies was decreased by 25%. That wasn't a true 25% at the elementary because we also had some additional costs for workbooks that increased this year. So you won't see a true 25%, but you should see it pretty clearly there. That's close in high school and middle school in both athletics. I have to shrink this just a tad here. Administration, you can see overall a $30,000 decrease, and that's coming from we decreased operational debt on interest for short-term borrowing. The hope was that interest rates would turn around a little bit here. They're not, so that's bad on the revenue side of things, good on the expense side, so we can decrease our expense. but then you have to have a corresponding decrease on the revenue side. And then probably most notably, and we again talked about this last week, was our workers' compensation, a decrease in premium, and that's because we, hopefully it's not just luck, that we just haven't been not slipping and maybe falling as much. Hopefully that's from, making a concerted effort to make sure that we have things salted and sanded in the winter, and that we're talking to people and making sure that they're maybe dressing appropriately, because once that staff member drives onto our parking lot and until they leave, we're responsible for them. The next significant area again is in transportation, and you can see the two areas that we increased, and those were increased basically on actual costs. Moving down to operations, we were fortunate to not have to increase our utilities. You can see that we're keeping them at zero, and that's because as we go through this, we still feel we have, based on our actuals, cost for this year, that we have an estimated 12% increase built into the budget based on the actuals. So whatever we're doing in our area of energy management, and I give Mr. Stutzman a lot of credit for basically pulling this all together and helping us reach that potential of those savings. So we're able to, even though prices have not significantly went up with probably natural gas, electricity has continued to grow, and we're able to maintain those budgets. And when you start adding 5% to $500,000, that gets to be a significant increase. So whatever we're doing pretty good, because I believe last year we actually had a decrease in these budgets. So, although I just did read in the paper that it sounds like natural gas prices might be starting to spike upward again, so we'll just have to wait and see in that area. And then again, a lot of these things, when you're looking at property services, general supplies, we're trying to find new vendors that are going to provide us the same quality of product at a better cost so that we can save some dollars. So you can see Mr. Revis is hoping to find those areas, or savings in those areas. The construction budget, this is a little bit misleading. Typically in any given year we try to shoot for $350,000 in the budget. Last year we were fortunate to be able to put $518,134 in the budget, and depending on how things go this year, we might be able to move that back up, but we've met our goal that we try to attain, and that's $350,000. Again, maintenance, property services, and then you can see the associated costs with the refuse disposal. And then district-wide programs, now you start to see a little bit clearer picture here. Project Lead the Way is a new budget item. Overall, the Project Lead the Way budget is down about $40,000, so we just have a new budget item in the supplies to keep that program ongoing. And then you can see a corresponding decrease of at least $30,245 on computers. Leadership program also, we spent about $50,000 on the leadership program. We've cut that program cost hopefully in half to $25,000. So, and again, we've talked about that. And here's your tuition open enrollment. Our open enrollment increased $274,879 due to increased numbers. So when we're talking about keeping kids in school, we're talking about offering more programs for kids, and whether that's virtual schools or whatever it might be. The more kids we keep at school, the more dollars we're able to generate on the revenue limit. And you can see, if you take a look at the net cost here, you're going to see a significant increase. This is a dollar figure that you have to come up with. Now, the good news about this dollar figure is it's not going to get higher. It's going to get lower, but it depends, because what happens when the kids show up on that third Friday count, you want to be able to we're going to find out actually if the kids did or did not go. And they do play games with these numbers. The schools that have these kids want to keep these kids until the third Friday count. Once the third Friday count happens and occurs, you cannot really go back and adjust those numbers so that you can increase your revenue limit. And that's certainly for sure once you get to the set the levies. So they have to be in attendance a day after and a day before, and once that occurs, you're pretty much done. So, and we've seen it in this district where we've had kids attend a virtual school for the first 4 weeks of school, and all of a sudden they're not there. They've showed up at our door, so now we've lost those dollars, and we're still providing them an education, but they went to the virtual school. Now, does that happen a lot? I don't know, but I know it happens. So whether that's intentional or unintentional, I can't say, but when the kid shows up at our doors, we keep them, we got them, regardless of whether it's working or not. So, and we're okay with that. We enjoy that challenge. Again, we talked about the CESA payments. They're down. What's that?
Said yes, we do.
The $5,300, we've talked about that. And then finally, again, that transfer to special education increased about $247,984. So again, you're looking at some increases here that are pretty significant and start to offset some of the other savings we had, so you can see why we had to make the adjustments in our budgets that we did. Probably, I'm not all the way through here, but the rest of the budgets, really there is no significant increase or decrease, whether that be curriculum or technology, talented and gifted, or wellness. The final document that we should probably take a look at is this Tier 1 and Tier 2 reduction, so we can kind of review with people how we arrived at where we're at, how we were able to make this budget work. And I can honestly say it looks like it works now, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't without pain. And I think all of us who sat through the meetings know how emotional some of the reductions could get. We know how they affected the people in the positions, and we know how they'll affect the students. So this wasn't a painless process. Now, having said that, we were able to make budget this year. And you know how painful it was this year to get to that point. When you look at $570,000, you know that you're going to have to reduce next year right off the bat. It just has increased that pain probably 10 times, because now every cut will start to have a significant impact on kids. We've done the best we can. Mrs. Orgy, I think you would concur to limit the actual impact on kids. Again, it wasn't without pain, but going farther, it will be very, very difficult. So I would start at the bottom of that first page. When we take a look at total reductions needed, and this was based on the estimate that we did two estimates, one using the Baird model, and then I developed my own estimate. Between the two, we came up with total reductions needed were about $2,076,000. The total reductions that were ultimately recommended were about $2,200,000. Now, that would say there'd be $119,317. Now, when you go through the budget process, things aren't exact, so we modified and made the budget balance, and we've done that, I think, in a pretty good fashion. So we can see the Tier 1 reductions here. A secretary in the district office, an aide at this building, Robert Cooper Learning Center, a half Robert Cooper Learning Center decisions teacher, a full-time band teacher, a full-time social studies, a full-time math teacher, a full-time English teacher, a full-time business education teacher, a half-time general music teacher. The 4-year-old kindergarten was eliminated, but we brought it back in because we're not sure of the numbers, so we just wanted to make sure we were able to do that and not have an impact. A study hall at the high school, a half-time secretary at the high school, a computer aide at the high school, and then you can see the decreases in the non-salary budgets for the buildings, along with operations and maintenance, trying to make things work there, and then an EEA, an aide at the high school. That was ARA funded. And then when we met finally finished the Tier 2 reductions last week. You can see the changes that were made there. Those that were yellow were now red. So in total, when we take a look at probably the total reductions again that we've made, we've eliminated probably close to $2.2 million. Now, not all that came from reductions because there were some additions. Again, the jobs bill funding accounts for about $570,000, along with reductions from salary and fringe for our teachers, administrators, and central office. Because our support staff is under contract for 1 year, they will not realize, we will not realize any savings from that group until July 1st of 2012. And those total reductions in salary and fringe equal about $1,250,000. So, in brief, that's the budget we've put together and presented to you. I think, through the dialogue that has been had on Tuesday night, I think everything that we talked about that needed to be eliminated was eliminated, and the athletic fees were not implemented as we had discussed and were concerned about at that point in time. So, questions, concerns, comments? We don't need approval tonight. It won't be approved until the July board meeting to be presented, so again, more information.
That's the third Monday in July. So switch to Mondays.
Thank you again, Mr. Gordon, for all your work and your efforts. We really appreciate it. We really do.
Again, if you ever have questions, don't hesitate to call.
He goes over it and over it and over
Well,
it.
that's obvious, and I told him earlier that I know it has to seem redundant to him, but it sure helps us every time he goes through it.
I worry about him a little bit when I walk into his office and he's just staring at the screen.
I bring people to help me stare at it too.
That's good.